Imagine experiencing like the most severe, intense, burning pain of your life.
Oh, yeah. The kind of pain that just alters everything.
Right, how you sit, how you walk, how you engage in your relationship. So you go to the doctor, completely desperate for answers. But when they examine you, they look at the tissue, they see absolutely nothing wrong,
Yep.
and they tell you that the pain is basically all in your head.
Which is just a devastating thing to hear.
It really is. But for, 8 to 15% of women, at some point in their lives, that kind of medical gaslighting isn't just a hypothetical scenario. It is a daily reality.
Yeah.
So I want to welcome you to today's deep dive, where our mission is to unpack a stack of incredibly complex medical literature to answer a highly specific, but honestly a genuinely fascinating question.
It really is
We're
fascinating.
going to map out the exact clinical link between having a persistent systemic autoinflammatory condition. So, like mast cell activation syndrome, rheumatoid arthritis, or just a generally hyperactive immune system, and the development of a very localized chronic pain condition.
Right, which is called idiopathic localized vestibulodynia.
Exactly. Often referred to as provoked vestibulodynia, or PVD.
And to really grasp the gravity of this, we need to set the baseline for what PVD actually is.
Yeah, let's start there.
It's characterized by severe localized pain right at the vulvar vestibule, which is the tissue surrounding the vaginal opening. And this pain is typically provoked by touch.
Right, so we're talking about an agonizing burning or like a stabbing sensation triggered by something as routine as tampon insertion or wearing tight jeans or intercourse.
Exactly. And for decades, because the medical field relies so heavily on what can be seen, like a broken bone on an x-ray or a visible rash, these patients were just dismissed.
Because the tissue visually looks completely normal to the naked eye.
Right. So the default assumption was, oh, this must be psychological distress rather than a real physical pathology.
Okay, let's unpack this, because that all-in-your-head dismissal is exactly what we are going to dismantle today. We're going to explore how a systemic immune system glitch can fundamentally rewire the local nervous system, turning a tiny localized area of your body into an unrelenting alarm system.
It's a great way to put it.
And to help you visualize this as we go along,
Yeah.
imagine your body's immune system as a home's central electrical panel.
Okay, I like this.
What we're exploring today is how a massive underlying surge in the main breaker, representing that systemic inflammation, ends up permanently short-circuiting one highly specific light switch in the house.
Yes. And the clinical reality found in our sources completely rewrites that old narrative. PVD is not a psychological issue.
Right.
It is a pathological pain syndrome. I mean, in standard pain theory, we actually view inflammatory pain as a biological advantage. It's protective.
Right, like if you sprain your ankle, your body generates inflammatory pain to force you to stop walking on it while the ligaments heal.
Exactly. But the pain in PVD is totally maladaptive. The pain itself is the disease.
Wow.
It's a fundamental dysfunction of the somatosensory nervous system, resulting in something called allodynia.
And allodynia is when the nervous system registers severe pain from a stimulus that shouldn't cause any pain at all, right?
Exactly. It's like feeling a third-degree burn when a doctor simply touches the tissue with a soft cotton swab.
Wait, hold on. I'm looking at these notes, and there's a massive contradiction here that I really need you to clear up.
Okay, what is it?
You're saying this is a localized fire, a physical pain syndrome, but you also just mentioned that on a standard physical examination, the vulva appears completely normal.
Right.
So where are the classic signs of a fire? I mean, if there's physical inflammation, why is there no redness, no swelling, no heat? How can there be a fire if the doctor can't see the flames?
It's an excellent question, and it honestly highlights exactly why this condition remained a mystery for so long. The macroscopic signs, meaning the visible swelling or obvious surface-level redness that a doctor typically looks for, are entirely absent.
Right.
But the inflammation is absolutely real. It's just burning on a microscopic cellular level.
Ah.
Yeah. When researchers stopped relying on the naked eye and started using advanced optical technology, specifically tools like cross-polarized light and laser Doppler perfusion imaging, the whole picture changed.
Because those tools allow us to look beneath the surface of the skin,
Right.
To map out the microvascular activity.
Exactly. And they revealed enhanced subsurface blood flow known as erythema that is completely invisible without the technology.
So the body is flooding the area with blood, reacting to a threat.
Yes. The fire is burning. It's just burning beneath the floorboards.
That is, wow. And here's where it gets really interesting, because the sources point to a very specific cellular culprit fanning those hidden flames, and that's mast cells.
Ah, yes. Mast cell.
For anyone listening who might not be a cellular biologist, mast cells are the immune cells that most of us know because they release histamine during an allergic reaction.
Right, the allergy cells.
Yeah, if you get hives from pet dander, mast cells are the ones pulling the alarm. And according to the literature, these specific cells are incredibly concentrated in the mucosal tissues of the vagina and the bladder.
They are densely packed in those areas. They're basically acting as frontline sentinels, and they serve as this crucial bridge between the systemic immune system and this intensely localized pain.
So let's trace that mechanism. How does it start?
It usually starts with a trigger. The most commonly reported trigger in the clinical literature is a minor, often recurrent local infection, like a candida yeast infection.
Okay, pretty common.
Right. In a person with a standard immune response, the body fights off the yeast, the tissues heal, and the immune system stands down.
Makes sense.
But in a patient with a hyper-responsive immune system, particularly those with conditions like mast cell activation syndrome, or MCS, those local mast cells don't just react, they overreact.
They freak out.
Completely. They inappropriately degranulate. They essentially burst open, and when they do, they dump a massive cocktail of chemicals into the surrounding tissue.
And it's not just histamine, right?
No, not just histamine. They release an enzyme called heparinase and a highly potent protein called nerve growth factor, or NGF.
Okay, let me try an analogy here to ground this, because those are a lot of heavy biochemical terms.
Go for it.
Let's say the mast cells are like overly aggressive bouncers at a nightclub, and the nightclub represents the local tissue.
Okay, I can picture that.
A minor scuffle breaks out, the yeast infection. But instead of just handling it calmly, the bouncers completely lose their minds. The heparinase they release acts like a bulldozer, just completely tearing down the velvet ropes outside the club.
Yes.
And in the human body, those velvet ropes are the basement membrane of the tissue, right? The structural barrier.
Exactly.
So once those ropes are knocked down, the nerve growth factor, the NGF, acts as a VIP pass, just inviting all these pain-sensing nerve fibers to float into an area they aren't supposed to be in.
That is a perfect analogy. And we can actually see that exact VIP pass mechanism happening in the histopathology. The medical term for it is hyperinnervation.
Hyperinnervation. Okay.
Yeah. In studies where researchers take tiny vestibular tissue biopsies from women with PVD, they use specific chemical markers like the S100 stain to illuminate the nerves under a microscope.
And what do they find?
The results are staggering. They find a 10 times greater density of pain-sensing nerve fibers.
Wait, 10 times?
10 times. A 10-fold increase in nociceptors in the vestibular stroma of women with PVD compared to healthy controls.
That is a massive increase in the physical wiring for pain.
It is. And what makes this so insidious is that these new nerve fibers aren't just sitting there passively receiving signals.
Right.
They actively release their own chemical messengers called neuropeptides. Those neuropeptides then wash back over the mast cells, agitating them even further.
Oh, I see. So the nerves are essentially poking the bouncers, telling them to release more bulldozers and VIP passes.
Exactly.
It creates a vicious, self-sustaining loop.
It's a phenomenon known as neurogenic inflammation. The structural damage is driving the immune response, and the immune response is building more structural damage.
It just keeps feeding itself.
Yep. The nerves agitate the mast cells. The mast cells release NGF to grow more nerves, and the cycle perpetuates itself on a loop months or even years after the initial yeast infection is completely gone.
Which brings up a massive question. I mean, lots of women get yeast infections. It's incredibly common. But they don't all develop a 10-fold increase in pain receptors and get locked into a permanent cycle of neurogenic inflammation.
Right.
So why does this localized loop happen to some people and completely bypass others?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, the answer lies in underlying systemic immune dysregulation.
The central electrical panel.
Exactly. This isn't just a localized problem that happened by bad luck. It requires a systemic primer. The epidemiological data in our sources is very clear on this. Women with PVD are 2 to 3 times more likely to have a history of systemic allergies, things like chronic hives or severe, exaggerated reactions to insect stings.
And this is before the onset of the pelvic pain.
Long before. Their immune systems were already uniquely primed to overreact. They were walking around with a central electrical panel that was already surging.
And when I was reading through the genetic data in the sources, it looks like this surge is often baked right into their DNA.
It really is.
They frequently have genetic polymorphisms. Now, for the listener, a polymorphism is basically a small mutation in a gene. And these patients have mutations in genes with names like IL-1 beta, the IL-1 receptor antagonist, and mannose binding lectin.
Which is a bit of an alphabet soup.
It is.
Yep.
So instead of just listing the letters, what's actually happening here is that these mutations essentially break the body's off switch for inflammation.
That's precisely the mechanism. Genes like IL-1 beta produce primary inflammatory cytokines, which are basically the chemical text messages that tell the body to go into high alert defense mode.
Okay.
The receptor antagonist is supposed to act as the brakes, stopping that signal when the threat is gone.
Right.
But because of their genetic makeup, women with PVD often have a defective braking system. Their fibroblasts, which are the cells responsible for building the structural framework of tissues, naturally produce copious, exaggerated amounts of pro-inflammatory mediators like IL-6 and PGE2, even at rest.
So they are genetically predisposed to mount a massive inflammatory response to a minor threat, and then completely fail to shut that response down.
Exactly.
Which leads us to a really fascinating community-based study out of Minnesota regarding the thymus.
Yes, the study is so important.
Now, the thymus is a crucial organ for your immune system. It sits right behind your sternum. And you can think of it as the university where your T cells, your specialized immune fighters, go to mature and get their training.
Right.
The researchers in Minnesota found that at younger ages, women with vulvodynia actually have a significantly higher thymic output compared to healthy controls who don't have the condition.
This is a highly revealing piece of data. It suggests that their immune system is running incredibly hot from a very young age. The factory is overproducing.
Right. If the thymus is the factory that trains your immune cells, these genetic mutations are basically forcing the factory manager to run triple shifts from the day they are born.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
Because their system is constantly bathed in these hyperinflammatory chemical messengers. The thymus goes into absolute overdrive trying to keep up.
And the consequence of running a factory on triple shifts for years is that the machinery eventually breaks down.
It has to.
As these women age, that early overproduction leads to a precipitous, premature decline in their overall immune function.
And this systemic overdrive perfectly explains why PVD so frequently overlaps with other systemic autoimmune comorbidities.
It connects all the dots.
We see it heavily linked with rheumatoid arthritis, interstitial cystitis, which is a severe, painful bladder syndrome, and fibromyalgia.
The electrical analogy holds up perfectly here. If the main breaker is surging with too much power for years on end, multiple switches in the house are eventually going to spark and fail.
Oh, that makes so much sense.
In interstitial cystitis, for example, those exact same mast cells we talked about earlier are heavily concentrated in the lining of the bladder wall. Because of the systemic primer, they degranulate there as well, causing massive, unexplained inflammation in the bladder.
Wow.
It is the exact same underlying mechanism, just presenting in an adjacent room of the house.
Okay, I want to take a step back and look at the whole system now.
Sure.
If the local tissue at the vestibule is constantly firing pain signals, because it now has 10 times the normal amount of nerve endings, and the systemic immune system is genetically incapable of turning the inflammatory fire off,
Yeah.
what does this relentless signaling do to the brain and the spinal cord over time?
That is the exact threshold where this condition transitions from being a peripheral tissue problem to a central nervous system problem.
Okay.
There is a pivotal animal study in our sources using a rat model of PVD that illustrates this cascade beautifully. The researchers took female rats and applied repeated localized inflammatory challenges to their vulvar tissue using a substance called zymosin.
And zymosin is a yeast antigen.
Right. Yes. They used zymosin specifically because they wanted to accurately mimic those recurrent yeast infections we see triggering the condition in human patients.
And by doing it repeatedly, they are simulating that broken off switch we just talked about.
Exactly. And what they discovered was profound. The repeated local inflammation didn't just cause temporary localized pain.
What did it do?
The constant barrage of alarm bells traveling up the nerves led to a long-term adaptation in gene expression all the way up in the spinal cord.
Wait, really? The spinal cord?
Yes. The central nervous system literally rewired itself in response to the peripheral chaos.
So it's not just the local tissue at the vestibule changing. The entire communication highway heading up to the brain is being fundamentally altered.
In neurology, this is known as central sensitization. The researchers observed that the spinal cord actually upregulates the transcription of specific pain channels.
Let's break down what those channels are for the listener, because the mechanism is wild.
It really is.
The sources mention the spinal cord upregulating a receptor called TRPV1. And to put that in perspective, TRPV1 is the exact same receptor in your body, that detects the burning heat of a jalapeno pepper.
Yeah.
So your body is physically building more jalapeno sensors along your spinal cord. It also upregulates sodium ion channels like Nav 1.6 through 1.8, which act as the batteries powering these pain signals.
The nervous system is quite literally building more physical infrastructure to feel and process pain.
That is terrifying.
It becomes terrifyingly efficient at being in agony. In the rat models, it only took 4 inflammatory challenges with the yeast antigen to lock this centralized rewiring into place.
Only 4.
Just 4. But after that 4th challenge, the severe allodynia, the pain from normal touch persisted for over 135 days.
Lord.
And to put that in context, 135 days is a massive portion of a rat's total lifespan. The pain remained long after any trace of the initial yield antigen or local inflammation was completely gone.
Because the wiring had changed.
Exactly. The researchers even noted that the rats started exhibiting severe anxiety behaviors, like refusing to go into open spaces and testing mazes.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, the chronic pain fundamentally altered the emotional and spatial processing centers of their brains as well.
For anyone listening who has dealt with unexplained chronic pain, this is the scientific validation you have been waiting for.
Mm-hmm.
You aren't crazy. Your anxiety isn't a character flaw. Your body physically built the infrastructure to hurt, and your brain is reacting to a nervous system that is trapped in a permanent state of threat detection.
That's incredibly well said.
So what does this all mean for you listening? It means that idiopathic localized vestibulodynia is absolutely not some mysterious, isolated gynecological issue. It is a profound, deeply physical neuroimmune condition.
Absolutely.
We're looking at a scenario where a systemic inability to regulate inflammation driven by genetics, mast cell activation syndrome, or broader autoimmune overlaps violently collides with a localized trigger.
The perfect storm.
Right. This collision unleashes those mast cell bouncers, forces pain-sensing nerves to rapidly multiply by a factor of 10, and ultimately rewires the spinal cord's gene expression to permanently feel chronic pain.
But what's truly fascinating here, and what honestly gives me a lot of hope, is that the research doesn't just leave us with the stark reality of the problem.
Right.
It actually hints at a profound solution. In those exact same animal models we just discussed, the researchers tried something revolutionary.
What did they do?
They administered a mast cell stabilizer, specifically an antihistamine called ketotifen, or a nerve growth factor inhibitor. But they did it during the acute inflammatory phase.
Oh, while the fire was burning.
Yes. If they intercepted the immune system's chemical text messages while the microscopic fire was actively burning, it completely attenuated the nerve growth.
You're kidding.
No, it stopped the nociceptors from multiplying, it prevented the upregulation of those jalapeno pain channels in the spinal cord, and it completely prevented the development of chronic vulvar pain altogether.
That is an incredible implication for us to ponder as we wrap up. I mean, could the future of treating, or perhaps entirely preventing, devastating chronic pain syndromes lie simply in intercepting the immune system's communication at the exact right moment?
It's a huge possibility.
Catching that massive surge at the main breaker before the localized switch permanently shorts out and the spinal cord physically rewires itself. It completely reframes how we need to think about treating pain, moving away from just numbing the local tissue after the fact to actively stopping the neural proliferation in its tracks before the concrete sets.
It's a total paradigm shift.
It really is.
Oh.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep asking questions, keep looking beneath the surface of the research, and never accept that the pain is just in your head. Until next time.